The sound of shattering glass pierced the air, followed by a string of expletives that would make a sailor blush. I rushed into the kitchen, my heart pounding, to find Mark standing over a mess of broken dishes and spilled pasta sauce. "Damn it, Julia! Can't you put things away properly?" he snapped, his face flushed with anger. I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to point out that he was the one who had insisted on reorganizing the cabinets last week. Instead, I grabbed a broom and dustpan. "It's okay, honey. Accidents happen. Let me clean this up." As I swept up the shards, Mark stomped out of the kitchen, muttering under his breath. I sighed, feeling the weight of tension settle over our once peaceful home. "Everything all right down there?" Dennis's voice called from upstairs. "Fine, Dad," I shouted back, wincing at the strain in my voice. "Just a little accident, nothing to worry about." I finished cleaning and started on a new batch of pasta sauce, my mind wandering to happier times. It hadn't always been like this. When Mark and I first got married, we were blissfully happy, but then his father's accident changed everything. The timer on the stove buzzed, snapping me back to reality. I stirred the sauce and called out, "Dinner's ready!" Mark trudged back into the kitchen, his mood seemingly improved. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, nuzzling my neck. "Smells good, babe. Sorry about earlier." I leaned into his embrace, savoring the moment of peace. "It's okay. Let's just enjoy dinner, all right?" We set the table as Dennis made his way downstairs, each step slow and deliberate. I rushed to help him into his chair, ignoring Mark's impatient sigh. "How are you feeling today, Dennis?" I asked, spooning pasta onto his plate. He smiled weakly. "Better, thanks to you, Julia. Don't know what I'd do without you." Mark rolled his eyes. "Dad, you've got to start doing more for yourself. Julia's not your nurse." I shot Mark a warning glance. "It's fine. I'm happy to help." We ate in uncomfortable silence, the only sounds the scraping of forks against plates. I was about to attempt some small talk when the doorbell rang. Mark jumped up. "I'll get it!" I frowned, surprised by his eagerness. A moment later, I heard a familiar voice that made my stomach churn. "Hello, darlings." Patricia's shrill tone carried through the house. "I hope I'm not interrupting dinner." Mark's mother swept into the dining room, all designer clothes and overpowering perfume. She air-kissed Mark's cheeks before turning to me with a tight smile. "Julia, dear, you look tired. Are you getting enough rest?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine, Patricia. Would you like to join us for dinner?" "Oh no, I've already eaten. I just stopped by to discuss something with Mark." She turned to her son. "Do you have a moment, sweetheart?" Mark nodded eagerly. "Of course, Mom. Let's talk in the study." As they left, I caught a glimpse of Patricia slipping an envelope into Mark's hand. My curiosity piqued. I strained to hear their hushed conversation, but could only make out fragments. Perfect opportunity. She doesn't need to know. Take care of everything. A chill ran down my spine. What were they planning? Dennis cleared his throat, drawing my attention back to the table. His eyes, usually clouded with confusion, were surprisingly sharp. "Julia," he said softly, "I think we need to talk." Before I could respond, Mark and Patricia returned, both wearing suspiciously cheerful expressions. "Great news," Mark announced. "Mom's invited us on a trip to Europe, 2 weeks in Paris and Rome. Isn't that exciting?" I blinked, stunned. "But what about your father? We can't just leave him alone." Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, we'll hire a nurse. It'll be fine." As Mark launched into enthusiastic travel plans, I caught Dennis's eye. He gave me a subtle nod, confirming my growing suspicion that something wasn't right. In that moment, I realized our seemingly perfect family was about to be turned upside down. And I had a sinking feeling that I was the only one not in on the secret. The moving truck rumbled away, leaving us standing in Patricia's driveway, surrounded by boxes and uncertainty. I took a deep breath, trying to quell the anxiety bubbling in my chest. This was supposed to be temporary, just until we could find a place better suited for Dennis's recovery. But as I caught Patricia's critical gaze sweeping over our belongings, I had a sinking feeling that temporary might stretch longer than I'd hoped. "Well, don't just stand there gawking," Patricia chirped, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Let's get you settled in." Mark grabbed a box and followed his mother inside, leaving me to help Dennis navigate the front steps. As we made our way into the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were crossing a threshold into something far more complicated than a simple living arrangement. The first few days were a whirlwind of unpacking and adjusting. Patricia flitted about, offering unsolicited advice on everything from how to arrange our clothes to the proper way to make coffee. I bit my tongue, reminding myself that she was doing us a favor by taking us in. One morning, I was helping Dennis with his physical therapy exercises when Patricia burst into the room, her face pinched with displeasure. "Julia, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I couldn't help but notice you've rearranged the guest room. I thought we agreed you'd keep things as they were." I blinked, caught off guard. "I'm sorry, Patricia. I just moved a few things to make it easier for Dennis to get around." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Well, I'd appreciate it if you'd consult me before making any changes. This is still my house, after all." As she turned to leave, I saw Dennis roll his eyes behind her back. I stifled a laugh, grateful for the moment of shared frustration. The weeks wore on, and Patricia's helpful suggestions became more frequent and less subtle. She critiqued my cooking, my cleaning, even the way I helped Dennis. Mark, ever the dutiful son, seemed oblivious to the growing tension. One evening, I was folding laundry when I overheard Patricia and Mark talking in hushed tones in the study. "I'm just saying, Mark, she's not exactly wife material," Patricia hissed. "The way she coddles your father, it's like she's forgotten her place in this family." My hands froze mid-fold, my heart pounding in my ears. Mark's response was muffled, but I caught enough to make my blood run cold. "I know, Mom, but we need her right now, just until Dad's better, and we can—" The rest of his sentence was lost as they moved further into the room. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my mind reeling. What were they planning? And how could Mark talk about me like that? Later that night, as Mark snored softly beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts a tangled mess. I thought about the life we'd left behind, the dreams we'd had. When had everything gone so wrong? A soft knock at the door jolted me from my reverie. I padded across the room, opening it to find Dennis standing there, looking more alert than I'd seen him in weeks. "Julia," he whispered, his eyes darting nervously down the hall, "we need to talk. There's something you should know about Patricia and Mark." My heart raced as I ushered him into the room. As Dennis began to speak, his words confirming my worst fears and revealing even darker truths, I felt the last vestiges of my old life crumbling away. In that moment, standing in the dim light of Patricia's guest room, I realized that the family I thought I'd married into was nothing but a carefully constructed facade. And as Dennis laid bare the web of lies and manipulation that surrounded us, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone. It was time to make some calls and start planning my next move. Because one thing was crystal clear. I couldn't stay in this house of secrets and lies for much longer. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I made a silent vow. I would protect Dennis, uncover the truth, and find a way out of this mess, no matter the cost. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, mocking my exhaustion. I'd been up since dawn, preparing breakfast, tidying the house, and helping Dennis with his morning routine. As I scrubbed dishes, my mind wandered to the life I'd imagined for myself. This certainly wasn't it. "Julia!" Patricia's shrill voice cut through my reverie. "Where's my morning tea?" I bit back a sigh. "Coming, Patricia." As I set the steaming cup before her, Patricia wrinkled her nose. "Is this Earl Grey? You know I prefer English breakfast in the morning." "I'm sorry," I said, forcing a smile. "We're out of English breakfast. I'll pick some up today." Patricia huffed. "See that you do. And while you're at it, the living room could use a good dusting. Really, Julia, I expected better from you." I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to snap back. Instead, I nodded and retreated to the kitchen, where I found Mark lounging with his coffee. "Honey," I started, "I could really use your help today. Dennis has a doctor's appointment, and I need to run errands." Mark cut me off with a wave of his hand. "Sorry, babe. I've got a big meeting at work. You can handle it, right?" Before I could respond, he was out the door, leaving me alone with my frustration and a mountain of tasks. The day dragged on, each hour bringing a new challenge. Dennis struggled with his physical therapy, his progress seeming to plateau. Patricia's complaints echoed through the house, a constant reminder of my perceived shortcomings. By evening, I was at my breaking point. As I helped Dennis into bed, he squeezed my hand, his eyes full of concern. "Julia," he said softly, "you can't keep going like this. It's too much for one person." I felt tears prick at my eyes. "What choice do I have, Dennis? Mark's always working, and Patricia—" I trailed off, not wanting to speak ill of his wife. Dennis shook his head. "Patricia has always been difficult, but this is beyond the pale. And Mark?" He sighed heavily. "My son should be ashamed of himself." Just then, Patricia's voice rang out from downstairs. "Julia, where are you? These floors won't mop themselves." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. "I should go," I murmured to Dennis. As I descended the stairs, I found Patricia standing in the foyer, arms crossed. "Really, Julia," she began, her tone dripping with disdain, "I don't know why you insist on spending so much time with Dennis. He's perfectly capable of putting himself to bed." Something inside me snapped. "He's your husband, Patricia, and he needs our help. Why can't you see that?" Patricia's eyes widened, then narrowed dangerously. "How dare you speak to me like that in my own home? I've been nothing but generous, taking you in, and this is how you repay me?" "Generous?" I laughed bitterly. "You've done nothing but criticize and complain since we got here. I'm doing my best to take care of everyone, and it's never enough for you." Our voices had risen, echoing through the house. I heard the front door open, and Mark stepped in, looking bewildered. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Patricia turned to her son, tears welling in her eyes. "Oh, Mark, your wife is being absolutely dreadful to me. I don't know how much more of this I can take." Mark's face hardened as he looked at me. "Julia, what's wrong with you? How could you treat my mother this way?" I stared at him, incredulous. "Are you serious? After everything I've done, you're taking her side?" The tension in the room was palpable. I looked from Mark to Patricia, suddenly seeing them clearly for the first time. They were two sides of the same coin, manipulative and self-serving. In that moment, I made a decision. "I'm done," I said quietly. "I can't do this anymore." Mark's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" I straightened my spine, meeting his gaze. "I'm saying that something has to change. Either we leave this house, or I'm leaving alone." The silence that followed was deafening. As I turned and walked away, leaving Mark and Patricia stunned in the foyer, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. I had no idea what would happen next, but I knew one thing for certain: things would never be the same again. The days following my outburst were tense, to say the least. Mark barely spoke to me, spending most of his time at work or locked away in Patricia's study. Patricia, for her part, had taken to ignoring me entirely, communicating only through icy glares and pointed sighs. But amid the frosty silence, I found an unexpected source of warmth: Dennis. One morning, as I helped him with his exercises, he grasped my hand firmly. "Julia," he said, his voice stronger than I'd heard in weeks, "I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you're doing." Tears pricked at my eyes. "Thank you, Dennis. That means more than you know." He nodded, a determined look crossing his face. "I've been thinking. It's time I started pushing myself harder." "Will you help me?" "Of course," I replied, feeling a spark of hope ignite in my chest. Over the next few weeks, Dennis and I fell into a new routine. We'd start each day with more challenging exercises, pushing the boundaries of what he could do. Some days were frustrating, filled with setbacks and pain. But there were also moments of triumph. The first time he stood unassisted, the day he managed to walk the length of the hallway with just a cane. Each small victory felt like a personal win, a reminder that my efforts weren't in vain. As Dennis grew stronger, so did my resolve. One afternoon, as we rested after a particularly grueling session, Dennis turned to me with a serious expression. "Julia, there's something you need to know about Patricia and Mark." My heart raced. "What is it?" Before he could answer, the door burst open. Patricia stood there, her face a mask of fury. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed. "You're pushing him too hard. He's not ready for this." I stood my ground. "Dennis is making great progress. The doctor agrees that—" "The doctor?" Patricia interrupted. "What doctor? I haven't authorized any appointments." "I did," Dennis said firmly. "I'm perfectly capable of making my own medical decisions, Patricia." Patricia's face turned an alarming shade of red. "Mark!" she shrieked. "Mark, come here at once." Moments later, Mark appeared, looking flustered. "What's going on?" Patricia pointed an accusing finger at me. Your wife has been making decisions behind our backs. She's endangering your father's health." Mark's expression hardened. "Is this true, Julia?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I've been helping Dennis with his recovery. Yes, and he's improving. If you'd been around more, you'd see that." Mark's eyes flashed with anger. "How dare you? We took you in, gave you a place to stay, and this is how you repay us?" "Repay you," I laughed bitterly. "I've been working myself to the bone taking care of this family while you two plot and scheme behind my back." The room fell silent. Dennis cleared his throat. "Son, your wife is right. She's been doing all the work while you and your mother—" He trailed off, shaking his head. Mark's face paled. "Dad, you don't understand. We're just trying to protect you." "Protect me from what?" Dennis demanded. "From getting better? From regaining my independence?" Patricia stepped forward, her voice sickly sweet. "Darling, you know your condition is delicate. We just want what's best for you." I watched the exchange, pieces falling into place. The hushed conversations, the mysterious meetings, the resistance to Dennis's recovery, it all pointed to something sinister. "What are you two hiding?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark and Patricia exchanged a panicked look. In that moment I knew. Whatever secret they were keeping, it was big, and it had everything to do with Dennis's accident and recovery. Dennis struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on his cane. "I think it's time we had a family meeting," he said, his voice filled with a quiet authority I'd never heard before. No more secrets, no more lies. As I helped Dennis to the living room, my mind raced. Whatever was about to be revealed, I had a feeling it would change everything. And I knew with absolute certainty that I was ready to face it head on. The time for playing happy families was over. Now it was time for the truth. The tension in the living room was palpable as we gathered for the long-overdue family meeting. Dennis sat in his armchair, his posture more upright than I'd seen in months. Mark and Patricia perched on the edge of the sofa, exchanging nervous glances. I stood by the fireplace, my heart pounding. Before anyone could speak, Patricia cleared her throat. "Before we get into whatever this is, I have an announcement to make." She plastered on a bright smile. "Mark and I are going on a vacation to Europe, 2 weeks in Paris and Rome. Isn't that wonderful?" I felt like I'd been slapped. "What, now? But what about Dennis's care?" Mark avoided my gaze. "We thought you could handle it, Julia. You've been doing such a great job." Dennis's eyes narrowed. "And when were you planning to inform me of this little getaway?" Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, darling, we didn't want to burden you with the details. You know how travel talk exhausts you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So you're just going to leave? After everything that's happened?" "Now, Julia," Patricia said, her voice sickly sweet. "Don't be dramatic. It's just a little vacation. We all need a break sometimes, don't we?" Something inside me snapped. "A break? A break from what exactly? From watching me run myself ragged, taking care of your family while you two scheme and plot?" Mark stood up, his face flushed. "That's enough, Julia. You're out of line." "No, she's not," Dennis said quietly. "Julia's right. It's time we address the elephant in the room." He turned to Mark and Patricia. "What really happened the night of my accident?" The color drained from Patricia's face. "I don't know what you mean, darling. You fell down the stairs, remember?" Dennis shook his head. "No, I don't remember. But I've been having flashes, arguments, raised voices, something about the company." Mark's hands were shaking. "Dad, you're confused. The doctors said your memory might be affected." "Stop lying," I shouted, surprising even myself with the force of my words. "Whatever you're hiding, it ends now. Dennis deserves the truth." Patricia stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. Mark, we're leaving. Now." As they moved towards the door, I blocked their path. "Not until you explain yourselves." Mark's eyes flashed with anger. "Move, Julia. You have no idea what you're getting into." "Then enlighten me," I challenged. For a moment, I thought Mark might push past me, but then his shoulders sagged. "Fine. You want the truth? Dad was going to sell the company. He said he was tired, wanted to retire. But Mom and we couldn't let that happen. We tried to talk him out of it, but he wouldn't listen." Dennis's voice was barely a whisper. "So you what? Pushed me down the stairs?" Patricia let out a strangled sob. "It was an accident. We were arguing, and you just fell. We never meant for any of this to happen." The room spun around me as the implications of their confession sank in. They had been willing to let Dennis languish, to keep him dependent, all to maintain control of the company. "You monsters," I breathed. Mark reached for me. "Julia, please. You have to understand." I recoiled from his touch. "Understand what? That you've been lying to me our entire marriage? That you were willing to sacrifice your own father's health for money?" Patricia's eyes hardened. "You ungrateful little—" "Enough!" Dennis's voice boomed through the room. With effort, he pushed himself to his feet. "Mark, Patricia, I want you out of this house. Now." "But, Dad—" Mark started. Dennis held up a hand. "No, I've heard enough. Go on your vacation. When you return, my lawyers will be in touch." As Mark and Patricia hurried out, casting panicked glances over their shoulders, I felt a strange mix of relief and terror. The truth was out, but the battle was far from over. Dennis turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and determination. "Julia, I'm going to need your help. Are you with me?" I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. "Every step of the way, Dennis. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As the door slammed behind Mark and Patricia, I knew we were standing on the precipice of something monumental. The life I had known was over. But perhaps, just perhaps, something better was about to begin. The house felt eerily quiet in the days following Mark and Patricia's hasty departure. Dennis and I moved through the rooms like ghosts, each lost in our own thoughts. The weight of recent revelations hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the betrayal we'd both endured. On the third morning, I was preparing breakfast when Dennis wheeled himself into the kitchen, a determined look on his face. "Julia," he said, his voice stronger than I'd heard in months, "we need to talk." I set down the spatula, my heart racing. "What is it, Dennis?" He took a deep breath. "I haven't been entirely honest with you. My recovery, it's been progressing faster than I've let on." To my astonishment, Dennis pushed himself up from the wheelchair, standing on shaky but steady legs. He took a few tentative steps towards me, no cane in sight. "Oh my God," I breathed. "Dennis, this is amazing, but why didn't you tell me?" His eyes clouded with shame. "I was afraid of what Patricia and Mark might do if they knew I was getting better. But after what happened, I can't hide anymore." As the implications of his words sank in, a mix of emotions washed over me. Joy at his progress, anger at the deception, and a growing sense of determination. "We need to act fast," I said, my mind racing. "Mark and Patricia could be back any day. We need a plan." Dennis nodded grimly. "I've been thinking about that. I know where Patricia keeps all the important documents, financial records, company papers, everything. If we can get our hands on those—" "We could expose them," I finished, a spark of hope igniting in my chest. For the next few hours, Dennis and I pored over the house, searching for any evidence of Mark and Patricia's misdeeds. We found hidden bank statements showing suspicious transfers, emails discussing the accident, in coded language, and even a draft of a revised will that would have left Dennis with nothing. As we sat surrounded by damning evidence, Dennis's phone buzzed. His face paled as he read the message. "It's Mark," he said, his voice tight. "They're coming back early. They'll be here tomorrow morning." Panic clawed at my throat. What do we do? Dennis's eyes hardened with resolve. "We finish this tonight." What followed was a whirlwind of activity. We scanned documents, made copies, and prepared a detailed timeline of events. Dennis called his lawyer, arranging an emergency meeting for first thing in the morning. As night fell, we sat in the living room, the fruits of our labor spread out before us. The magnitude of what we were about to do hit me like a tidal wave. "Dennis," I whispered, "are you sure about this? Once we do this, there's no going back." He reached out, grasping my hand tightly. "Julia, you've been more family to me in these past months than my own flesh and blood. Whatever happens, we face it together." Tears pricked at my eyes as I nodded, squeezing his hand in return. Suddenly, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway shattered the moment. My blood ran cold as I heard familiar voices approaching the front door. "They're back," I hissed, panic rising in my chest. "What do we do?" Dennis's face set in grim determination. "We stand our ground. No more hiding. No more lies." As the key turned in the lock, I felt a strange calm settle over me. We'd prepared for this, planned for every contingency. Whatever Mark and Patricia threw at us, we were ready. The door swung open, revealing Mark and Patricia, their faces a mix of surprise and suspicion as they took in the scene before them. "What's going on here?" Mark demanded, his eyes darting between Dennis and me. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Welcome home," I said, my tone laced with steel. "We need to talk." As Mark and Patricia stepped into the room, the air crackled with tension. This was it, the moment of truth. Everything we'd been through, everything we'd discovered had led to this confrontation, and I was ready to fight with everything I had. The tension in the room was suffocating as Mark and Patricia stood frozen in the doorway, their eyes darting between Dennis and me, and the incriminating documents spread across the coffee table. "What is all this?" Patricia demanded, her voice shrill. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "This is the truth, Patricia. All of it." Mark stepped forward, his face a mask of fury. "What have you done, Julia, going through our private papers? This is a violation." "No," Dennis interrupted, slowly rising to his feet. "The only violation here is what you two have done to this family." Patricia's face drained of color as she watched her husband stand. "Dennis, how... You're walking." "No thanks to you," I spat, my anger finally boiling over. "We know everything. The accident, the company, the will, all of it." Mark lunged forward, reaching for the papers, but I was quicker. I snatched them up, backing away. "Don't even think about it, Mark. It's over." "You don't understand," Mark pleaded, his composure cracking. "We were trying to protect the family legacy. Dad was going to throw it all away." Dennis's voice was cold as steel. "It wasn't yours to protect, son. The company, the money, none of it matters more than trust and family, something you seem to have forgotten." Patricia's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You ungrateful little witch," she hissed at me. "We took you in, gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? By turning my husband against us?" I stood my ground, meeting her gaze. "You did this to yourselves, Patricia. Your greed, your manipulation. It ends now." The room erupted into chaos. Mark lunged for the documents again, this time managing to grab a handful. Patricia screamed accusations, her carefully manicured facade crumbling. Dennis tried to intervene, but in the scuffle, he lost his balance. Time seemed to slow as I watched Dennis fall. In that moment, all I could think about was that night, the night of his accident. Had it looked like this? Had he reached out, desperate for help, only to be betrayed by those he trusted most? I dove forward, managing to catch Dennis before he hit the ground. As we stumbled, my elbow caught the edge of the coffee table. Pain exploded through my arm, but I held on, easing Dennis onto the sofa. "Enough!" I shouted, my voice raw with emotion. "Look at what you're doing. Your own father. You'd risk hurting him again just to cover your tracks?" Mark froze, the papers clutched in his trembling hands. For the first time I saw a flicker of shame in his eyes. Patricia, however, was beyond reason. "You have no right," she seethed. "This is our home, our family. You're nothing but an interloper, a gold digger who—" "That's enough, Patricia," Dennis cut in, his voice quiet but firm. "Julia is more family to me now than either of you, and as of this moment you are both no longer welcome in this house." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark's face crumpled, the reality of what he'd done finally sinking in. Patricia stood rigid, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "You can't be serious," she finally managed. "You can't just throw us out. Where will we go?" I stepped forward, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "That's not our problem anymore. You have until morning to pack your things and leave. If you're not gone by then, we'll have no choice but to involve the authorities." As the weight of our words sank in, I saw the fight drain out of Mark and Patricia. They looked suddenly small, defeated, no longer the towering figures of authority and control they'd once been. Dennis reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "It's over," he whispered. But as I looked at the broken family before me, at the husband I'd once loved and the life I'd thought I wanted, I realized that this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning, and for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. "No," I said softly, straightening my shoulders. "It's just beginning." The morning sun streamed through the windows as Dennis and I sat in his study, surrounded by stacks of documents and a sense of grim determination. It had been a week since we'd confronted Mark and Patricia, a week of sleepless nights and endless preparation. Today was the day we'd take everything public. "Are you ready for this?" Dennis asked, his voice steady but his eyes betraying a mix of sadness and resolve. I took a deep breath, nodding. "As ready as I'll ever be." What about you? This is your family we're about to expose. Dennis reached across the desk, grasping my hand. You're my family now, Julia. What Mark and Patricia did, they stopped being family the moment they chose greed over love. With trembling fingers, I pressed send on the email that would change everything. In an instant, our carefully compiled evidence was on its way to the board of directors, the company's legal team, and select members of the press. The response was almost immediate. My phone began buzzing incessantly with calls and messages. Dennis's lawyer arrived, looking grim but determined. As the morning wore on, the story broke across local news channels. Breaking news: scandal rocks prominent family business. CEO Dennis Hawthorne alleges attempted murder and fraud by son and wife. I watched the headlines scroll across the screen, feeling a surreal mix of vindication and sorrow. This was it, the moment of truth we'd been working towards. Suddenly, the front door burst open. Mark stormed in, his face contorted with rage. "How could you do this?" he shouted. "You've ruined everything." I stood my ground, facing the man I once thought I loved. "No, Mark. You ruined everything the moment you chose money over your father's life." Patricia appeared behind him, her usual poise shattered. "We can fix this," she pleaded, her eyes wild. "Dennis, darling, surely we can come to some arrangement. Think of the scandal, the family name." "Enough!" Dennis's voice boomed through the room. He stood, walking towards them without assistance. "The family name? The only thing tarnishing our name is your actions. It's over." As if on cue, the sound of police sirens filled the air. Mark's face drained of color. "You called the police? Your own son?" Dennis's expression was a mixture of pain and resolve. "You stopped being my son the moment you conspired against me." "Julia," he turned to me, "would you show the officers in?" I nodded, moving towards the door. As I passed Mark, he grabbed my arm. "Julia, please," he begged. "We can start over. I love you." For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd married. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the stranger he'd become. "No, Mark," I said softly. "You love what I represented, a way to keep your lifestyle, your inheritance, but you never truly loved me." As the police entered, reading Mark and Patricia their rights, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The nightmare was finally ending. Hours later, after the dust had settled and the house was quiet once more, Dennis and I sat on the porch, watching the sun set. "What now?" I asked, feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. Dennis smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time in months. "Now, we live. I'm thinking of selling the company, maybe starting a foundation. And you, Julia, you have your whole life ahead of you." I felt tears prick my eyes. I don't even know who I am anymore, outside of all this. Dennis squeezed my hand. "You're the woman who saved my life, who stood up for what's right no matter the cost. That's who you are, Julia, and I couldn't be prouder to call you family." As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years I felt truly free to discover who I was, what I wanted, and where I belonged. "You're right," I said, smiling through my tears. "This isn't an ending, it's a new beginning." Dennis raised his glass of iced tea. "To new beginnings and to family, the kind we choose." I clinked my glass against his, feeling a surge of hope for the future. "To family," I echoed. As night fell, I realized that sometimes the greatest acts of love involve letting go. I had let go of a toxic marriage, of false dreams, and of the person I thought I needed to be. In return, I had gained something far more precious: self-respect, true family, and the courage to face whatever came next. The journey had been painful, but as I sat there with Dennis, I knew that every step had been worth it. We had faced our demons, exposed the truth, and come out stronger on the other side. And now, finally, we were free to write our own stories. How could he do this to us? I muttered under my breath, bile rising in my throat as I took in the sight before me. My loving husband of 15 years, John, was strolling through the amusement park, his arm wrapped around the waist of a tall blonde. Laughing alongside them was a young boy around 6 or 7, gleefully clutching a stuffed animal prize. I grabbed Lily's hand, my fingers trembling. "Lily, honey," I choked out. "Let's go on the carousel, okay?" I steered my confused daughter away from the painful scene, barely holding myself together. Just hours earlier, John had kissed Lily on the cheek and wished her a happy birthday before rushing off for an emergency client meeting. And here he was, breaking promise after promise. I helped Lily onto a painted horse before settling onto my own with a deep exhale, struggling to gather my swirling thoughts. John and I had been college sweethearts, two idealistic kids ready to take on the world, mooning over dreams of a perfect family someday. After graduation, through lean times and multiple job switches, we had built a good life together. Or so I believed. We both worked hard, John as a marketing director and me a freelance CPA, hustling to pay the bills and save for Lily's future while still finding little moments of joy together as family. Sure, money had been tighter since I stepped back on work to care for Lily, and our date nights weren't as frequent anymore amid our tiring routines. But I thought our relationship was rooted in devotion and trust. I even overlooked John's recent distractedness as work stress. Oh, how wrong I was, that sneaking bastard! I glanced over at Lily, who was happily oblivious, giggling away on her carousel horse, my heart squeezed with anger at John's careless selfishness. By running off with some tramp, he was also abandoning his daughter on her 10th birthday. As we walked around after the ride, I slipped into numb autopilot, not trusting myself to hold it together if I dwelled any more on John's betrayal. I had to put on a brave smile for Lily's sake on her special day. We played carnival games, snacked on cotton candy, and laughed on the roller coasters. With each passing moment, though, I struggled to bury the simmering hurt and fury. Finally, as we exited yet another ride, Lily turned to me with questioning eyes. "Mom, it's been really fun today, but I kinda thought Dad would be here too." She trailed off uncertainly. "Is he going to come later for the fireworks?" The hope shining through my little girl's face unleashed a floodgate of long-suppressed emotions. I couldn't hold back the burning tears anymore. "Oh, sweetheart," I wrapped Lily in a fierce, protective hug as sobs racked my body. She deserved to know the truth. I swiped at my running mascara and met her alarmed eyes. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but I saw your dad here earlier. He was with another lady and boy." I watched Lily closely for her reaction. Confusion clouded her features. "What do you mean with them?" she asked hesitantly. I took a deep breath before continuing gently. "Honey, he had his arm around that woman, like he does with me sometimes, and he was playing with the boy too, winning him prizes." Lily's face fell as understanding dawned. "You mean, like a date? But dads don't go on dates with other moms. Does this mean he doesn't want to spend time with us anymore?" My heart cracked hearing the tremor in her small voice. I squared my shoulders, steeling my resolve right then. John may have betrayed me as a partner, but I would not let him hurt my little girl so callously. "Oh, Lily, I honestly don't know why your dad did this, but no matter what, we have each other. I'll always be here for you, okay?" I squeezed her hand supportively. Lily rushed into my arms again, hugging me tightly. "I love you, Mom," she whispered. Those 4 words were like a soothing balm, nourishing my soul and strengthening my conviction to shield Lily from further heartache in whatever ways necessary. As I held my brave daughter close, staring out at the colorful horizon, I sensed a new chapter dawning. No more blind trust without verification when it came to John. For Lily's well-being, I would get to the bottom of his shady behavior. If he thought he could just walk all over us while I dutifully covered for him, he had another thing coming. For now, I had a little girl's birthday magic to preserve at all costs. But soon enough, John would have to own up. Justice would be served one way or another. After all, this was just Act 1, and the real fireworks were yet to come. Over the next few weeks, I struggled to act normal whenever John was around. I didn't dare confront him yet without concrete proof of his betrayal. So I swallowed the acid words on the tip of my tongue each time he casually pecked my check after returning home late from another business meeting. The gnawing pit in my stomach grew more cavernous with each of his transparent lies. My raging suspicions were all but confirmed when I overheard John murmuring affectionately into his phone one night after he assumed I was asleep. I crept closer to the home office door and pressed my ear against it. "I missed you too, Jess," John chuckled softly. "Yesterday was so much fun. I can't stop thinking about our time together." Jess. Short for Jessica, perhaps? So the backstabbing weasel was on a first-name basis with his floozy girlfriend. I dug my nails into my clammy palms, struggling to restrain my disgust. John continued reminiscing in hushed tones about some resort getaway filled with cozy dinners and stolen kisses. My lungs constricted, bile rising in my throat. So, while John claimed to be on work trips, he was actually wining and dining his mistress at fancy hotels. I couldn't stomach hearing another word. I retreated back to our bedroom on unsteady feet, my earlier suspicion hardening into cold, hard fury. The next morning, I dropped Lily off at school before driving over to John's office. I simply had to clear the air once and for all. Surely there was an innocent misunderstanding. My loyal husband of 15 years would never actually cheat on me. With every mile, I desperately tried convincing myself of this alternate rosy reality. But when I stepped through the polished doors, my last hopes were dashed. "Why, yes, John Mitchell just left for Memphis," his startled secretary Evelyn confirmed. "He'll be meeting clients there before returning next Tuesday." Memphis, not the Jersey headquarters he had specifically mentioned to me in passing over breakfast. Throat constricting, I turned on my heels and fled to the safety of my vehicle before Evelyn could glimpse the hot tears of frustration stinging my eyes. Resting my head warily against the steering wheel, my last illusions withered away. My husband was indeed having an affair behind my back. Over the next week, my state of mind deteriorated into a foggy mess of anxiety and sorrow. I continued probing for the elusive truth, despite already knowing it deep down. When John didn't return on the expected Tuesday, instead extending his trip another 4 days, I hit my breaking point. As I tidied his drawers while sorting laundry, a flowery perfume wafted out that I didn't recognize. Underneath the folds, a lace negligee of a much smaller size than my own laid provocatively. That did it. All restraint evaporated instantly like steam. Snatching my purse with trembling hands while fighting angry tears, I convinced our next-door neighbor Jane to watch Lily for the night. Before I lost my nerve, I hopped into an Uber bound for the seedier side of town. It was time for drastic measures. I hesitated only briefly outside room 17B as the muffled sounds of ecstasy leaked under the door. Then, steeling my shaking bones, I boldly pushed inside. The exhibition of twisting limbs and tangled sheets burned my eyes, but I forced myself to keep watching through narrowed slits. No backing down now. I needed to see my cheating scumbag husband in all his whoring glory to file for the strongest divorce case possible. To think I had wasted years of loyalty and intimacy on this spineless loser humping the mattress without a care in the world. As they both erupted into climax, I whipped out my smartphone to capture the money shot. Click, click, click. Undisputable proof of adultery. No denying it now with this lurid footage in hand. "What the hell?" John shouted as the naked woman under him, likely Jessica, let loose an ear-piercing shriek. Their interlocked body parts scrambled to hide under the rumpled covers, but I had already seen enough. More than enough for multiple lifetimes, unfortunately. I smirked vindictively, pocketing my smoking gun evidence as the color drained from John's stubbled features. He began sputtering. "Susan, I can exp," but I slammed the door mid-sentence. Time to finally bust this pathetic cheater with the power of truth. My fulminating heart nearly rejoiced, picturing the fallout headed his way. The amusement park stretched before us in all its frenetic glory, a whirling kaleidoscope of colors under the bright summer sun. I squeezed Lily's hand tightly, hoping to infuse some of my nervous energy into her smaller frame. As we walked through the cheering crowds, nausea churned my otherwise empty stomach. This was it, the confrontation I had obsessed over planning since that sordid night at the hotel. When I stumbled upon John canoodling his busty mistress mid-thrust, I knew my decade-long marriage was finished. Once Lily turned 18, there would be nothing binding me to that cheating scumbag any longer. But I couldn't let my sweet Lily go on believing in her father's devotion any longer either. She had moped for days when John missed her chorus recital to extend his work trip. Meanwhile, that two-timing bastard was likely wining and dining Jessica at some five-star restaurant without a care in the world. An acidic fury licked my veins, imagining Lily continuing to pine for her father's affection that would never come. No, it was time she witnessed exactly what John prioritized over family. I would finally expose his true duplicitous colors. As we meandered through the park, scanning the swelling crowds, my heart pounded a frantic staccato beat. Where was that rat? Lily prattled on excitedly about rides, but her voice faded to background static against the rushing blood in my ears. And then suddenly, I spotted him. Talking to a caramel-haired woman by the funnel cake stand, his beefy arm draped possessively around her waist. At their feet stood a young boy with a thatch of chestnut hair, likely no older than 7. He was eagerly stuffing his face with confetti-dusted fried dough, getting sugar all over his round cheeks. My fists involuntarily clenched, and I nudged Lily gently. "See that man over there in the red shirt, sweetie?" I softly murmured against her hair. As she glanced over, her eyes doubled in size. "Daddy?" Lily screeched in disbelief. "Who is that lady with him and the little boy?" She whipped her head back and forth between me and John frantically as realization sunk in. Meanwhile, John had heard Lily's cry, his cocky grin melting like hot wax. His arm dropped from Jessica's waist as they spun to face us. I stalked closer, keeping a firm grip on Lily's clammy palm. Halting an arm's length away, I fixed my estranged husband with a blistering glare that could melt steel. "Well, isn't this quite the father-son outing, John?" I spat, vitriol coating each syllable. "Or maybe this blonde bombshell is just your new mommy replacement for when I kick you to the curb." John paled further as a sheen of sweat beaded his pasty skin. "Susan, let me explain," he choked out weakly. I cut off his pathetic sputtering with a disgusted snort as Jessica stared fixedly at the ground. "Save your smarmy excuses. Nothing justifies abandoning your wife and daughter to play house with this home-wrecking bimbo." I growled savagely. Meanwhile, poor Lily looked utterly lost and crestfallen as her fantasy father figure withered before her eyes. Seeing those fat alligator tears shimmering along her lashes fueled my raging inferno even hotter. "Is this why you are always too busy with work to spend time with me, Daddy?" Lily finally croaked out. John's shoulders slumped further as shame painted his features. He reached towards our daughter pleadingly, but she instantly recoiled several steps. "Bug, it's complicated. I never meant to hurt you or Mommy." I quickly intervened before he could poison Lily's mind with more deception. Having my innocent child comforting this cheating trash was unacceptable. Snatching Lily close before she could absorb more trauma, I addressed John with blistering contempt. "You sniveling coward are hereby cut off from our lives. I wasted too many years blinded by your lies already. Let's go, Lily." Keeping my head high, I steered us swiftly towards the park exit without another backwards glance. As we retreated from the battlegrounds, a bittersweet sensation flooded my frayed nerves. I had shielded Lily from further manipulation and uncover the ugly truth as promised. She would undoubtedly have many confusing emotions to process in the coming days. But moving forward, we could rebuild our lives free of John's contaminating presence. What lay ahead might seem uncertain, but embracing this new destiny solo could only lead to bigger and better things. I awoke with a jolt, instantly oriented to my unfamiliar surroundings. The floral wallpaper and lacy curtains were a far cry from my bedroom's simple blue hues. Then the events of the previous night came thundering back. That disastrous confrontation at the amusement park, which ended with John pathetically begging on his knees, a snotty mess of tears and excuses. Jessica and her son had already scurried off by then, not daring to meet my incensed glare. The raging aftermath was truly a sight to behold, apparently, with crowds of spectators gawking. After threatening John with a restraining order if he dared show his despicable face again, I hurried a shell-shocked Lily back home to safety. We collapsed into bed early, emotionally drained from the day's dramatic unraveling. Now, as morning light bathed the cozy cottage interior, I heard a soft rap at the bedroom door. I opened it to find Lily's petite frame swimming in an oversized t-shirt, her blonde curls a tangled bedhead. Wordlessly, I pulled my baby girl close, cocooning her in my warmth. We soon headed downstairs, lured by the delicious scent of Alice's famous blueberry pancakes. My college roommate had graciously offered her seaside vacation home when she heard of my impending separation. "You and Lily take however long you need," Alice urged last night over the phone. "Frank and I rarely use the Cape May place anyway." So this would be our safe haven until the divorce dust settled and I figured out longer-term housing. John may have shattered my rosy dreams, but I refused to crumble. I had a child relying on me. After enjoying Alice's fluffy stacks drowned in maple and some much-needed girl talk, Lily wandered outside to explore the beach. Gazing after her through the large kitchen windows, I let out a heavy sigh. My poor daughter didn't deserve any of this ugliness and betrayal after already losing her mother so young. At that moment, my cell vibrated loudly against the granite countertops. I glanced down to see John's goofy contact photo flashing insistently. Speak of the devil himself. Swiping angrily, I answered the call. Might as well rip the Band-Aid off fully regarding where things stood. Susan! John's voice crackled desperately through the speakers. Thank God you answered. Please don't hang up. Rolling my eyes in disgust, I growled, You have 2 minutes, John. Make it quick. I just wanted to explain everything. This whole mess with Jessica just got out of hand. He rushed on, not bothering to hide the desperation in his tone. Please, I'll do anything. Counseling, quit my job, just don't leave. Are you quite finished? I snapped sharply. Why should I believe anything spewing from your lying mouth? Does our decade together mean so little that you'd throw it away for some cheap trollop? No, I swear she meant nothing, John sputtered. It was only a stupid fling. I was selfish and weak. But I want to fix us. Please, Susan, I'm begging you. Think of our family. His words ignited a white-hot fury. I briefly imagined marching over to throttle some sense into that thick, stupid skull. How dare you appeal to family values after sneaking around behind our backs for who knows how long? I saw the text messages and racy lingerie, John, I snarled. Man up and take accountability for once. Consider this your final notice that I'm filing for divorce. I relished hitting the red end button on his sputtering excuses, feeling fully empowered by my conviction. The rose-tinted glasses had shattered fully, leaving no doubt remaining. Loyalty meant nothing to someone who could lie through their teeth so easily to my face all this time. Well, no more. I refused to waste another minute questioning my worth because of his moral failing. A new life awaited where Lily and I could thrive happily without John's toxicity. My attorney had already been contacted to proceed with the separation filing. Today marked the first strides towards an abuse-free future. Heading back outside into the salty ocean breeze, I joined my daughter constructing sandcastles, the horizon filled with nothing but boundless possibility. I tapped my foot impatiently against the worn linoleum, assaulting the last cold dregs of my coffee. Where was he? John better not stand me up again and leave me waiting here like an idiot. Not after explicitly requesting to meet one last time for closure. Mercifully, the nondescript diner door chimed open then. I spotted John shuffling towards my corner booth, appearing almost timid. Once seated across from me, though, his earlier contrition evaporated instantly. Leaning back against cracked red vinyl, John crossed his arms defiantly. All right, let's talk. But before you go making any rash decisions, Susan, hear me out. I want shared custody of Lily. I choked on my own saliva. Excuse me, you must be out of your mind, I countered through wheezing breaths. John barreled on aggressively. That adorable little girl deserves a father figure in her life. You honestly want to rob Lily of that joy? And disrupt her sense of normalcy even more? His beady eyes glinted with cunning determination. My fingernails carved half-moon indentations into my sweaty palms under the table. This manipulative snake thought he still could dictate terms? You lost any paternal privileges cheating on our family, John, I seethed quietly. Lily requires way more care and attention than you ever provided her anyway. Oh, please, John snorted derisively. I may have screwed up recently, but don't pretend it was all rainbows and sunshine before. With you off pampering high-end clients at all hours, poor Lily barely saw either of us most days. His accusations ignited my simmering rage into a full rolling boil. I fought the almost uncontrollable urge to lunge across the table and throttle John's thick neck. How dare you pin your neglect on my workload? I spat contemptuously instead. At least those clients guaranteed Lily's school funds, clothes, extracurriculars over the years, things she always had to beg her deadbeat father for. John at least had the decency to appear abashed, picking at non-existent lint. After a charged beat, he mumbled weakly, Jessica, she made me feel alive again, like before we became bogged down with so many responsibilities. Lifting his eyes beseechingly to meet my stony gaze, he implored, Can't we just try counseling, Susan? I can't lose you both. I surveyed John's aging visage critically, the wrinkles etching hard lines, bald patch spreading, and paunch steadily expanding. Was this really the same man I fell for years ago when his sculpted arms could effortlessly lift me against his firm chest? That John was long gone, apparently, replaced by this shallow, selfish imposter twiddling his thumbs across from me. I exhaled slowly, feeling the fight seep away. No, John. Too much damage is done. I saw the real you that night. Your complete apathy at destroying Lily's innocence and trust. As her mother, I refuse to let you keep poisoning her mind and self-worth. Pushing up from the table, I leaned across and fixed John with an icy glare. Consider this your final notice. If I see you anywhere near me or Lily again, I won't hesitate getting a restraining order. John lunged forward to grab my wrist pleadingly. Please, Susan, be reasonable. We can still fix this. I need you both. Wrenching my hand back forcefully, I tossed a crumpled 20 on the table that would easily cover both our untouched meals. John called after me desperately, but I didn't pause, pushing into bright daylight and taking a deep restorative gulp. The fresh outdoor air filled my lung with newfound clarity. I felt fully unburdened from my past illusions. John refusing accountability cemented I made the right call, kicking him to the curb for good. Settling behind my steering wheel, resolve coursed through me stronger than ever. I would inform my lawyer about John's delusional custody demands immediately to get that scum out of our lives quicker. The court would take one look at his sloppy appearance today, bloodshot eyes, tousled hair, mismatched shoes, and declare him an unfit parent easily. Peeling out onto the open road ahead, I cranked up the radio defiantly. 2 middle fingers saluted the shrinking diner behind me. John wanted a cutthroat legal battle? Oh, he would sorely regret awakening this mama bear's wrath. Deep breaths, Lily, sweetheart. We're in this together, okay? I squeezed my daughter's hand reassuringly as we exited the idling Uber. The courthouse facade towered over us, seeming to mock my frayed nerves. After months of exhausting paperwork, financial untangling, and legal maneuvering, we had finally arrived on Judgment Day. I prayed the Honorable Judge Dalton presiding over the proceedings today saw facts for what they were, that John was a lying, cheating scumbag undeserving of time with my precious daughter. As we navigated towards the assigned courtroom, a familiar grating voice accosted us from behind. There are my 2 favorite girls. Spinning on my kitten heels, I came face to face with the devil himself. John, in his grubby flesh and slightly disheveled suit, grinning like the moron he was. I quickly stepped in front of Lily, blocking his path. She peeked around my frame warily as I crossed my arms forbiddingly. Don't come any closer, John. We have nothing left to discuss. His greasy smile remained pasted in place. Susan, please, we shouldn't fight anymore. It's not good for Lily, he implored with faux sincerity. I just want to be a family again. Liar! Lily suddenly shouted, face scrunching angrily as she dodged under my arm. If you cared about me, you wouldn't have left us for that blonde witch. I gently tugged Lily back as she vented loudly. While immensely satisfied at my typically soft-spoken daughter finding her voice, I didn't need John's dramatics jeopardizing our case. Sure enough, he instantly switched tactics, amping up the waterworks for arriving spectators. Lillian, how can you say that? You know you're Daddy's special girl. I never meant to hurt anyone. Please, just come give me a hug. He stretched his meaty arms towards Lily beseechingly. I quickly intervened, shoving his grabby paws back forcefully. Through gritted teeth I seethed, Save your sniveling act, John. You lost any shot playing father months ago. Propelling Lily forward, I called over my shoulder, Let the courts finally set you straight. Settling into the creaky wooden benches with Lily tucked protectively under my arm, I steadied my nerves with deep breaths. We could do this. Justice would be served. I stroked Lily's baby fine hair soothingly as we awaited kickoff. Right on cue, an authoritative voice bellowed, Mitchell versus Mitchell, presiding Judge Dalton. We approached the podium as John did the same, keeping my expression schooled neutral. What followed next was a tedious hour rehashing the same tired arguments from our mediation session. John begged for leniency as an imperfect human, while I calmly recapped his endless lies and manipulation. Finally, Judge Dalton, an austere woman with spectacles perched severely on her nose, intervened. Enough, Mr. Mitchell. While your transgressions alone don't necessarily forfeit custody rights, Mrs. Mitchell makes valid claims to your parental unsuitability. John instantly reddened, opening his mouth for rebuttal, But the judge steamrolled on. There are concerning patterns here: missed school events, financial negligence regarding child support, empty promises that understandably eroded the mother-daughter trust. My heart swelled, hearing Judge Dalton finally hold John accountable. Justice was being served. Therefore, I hereby grant Mrs. Mitchell full physical and legal custody of Lillian Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell will be restricted to supervised monthly visits pending evaluation of sustained behavioral changes. She banged her gavel decisively. Court adjourned. The celebratory leap from our bench jostled several loose papers, but I didn't care one iota about decorum in that spectacular moment. Laughing joyously, I twirled a similarly elated Lily in gleeful circles. Nearby, John stood motionless, ashen-faced, as the bailiff approached to escort him out, while rattling off next steps for scheduling visit supervisor meetings. But suddenly, John shrugged off the restraint, charging towards us wildly. "You heartless bitch!" he roared, spittle flying. "You can't steal my daughter away!" Security lunged to apprehend John's bulk as he thrashed violently like a rabid animal, his blistering gaze promising unfinished business even while being dragged away in handcuffs. I instinctively clutched Lily tighter to shield her from the horrifying outburst. But as John disappeared from view, I slowly exhaled the lingering tension. We had endured the worst already. The legal system would protect us from here on out. Today commemorated much-awaited closure and the dawn of a hopeful new chapter. I tapped my heels impatiently against scuffed linoleum, assaulting the last cold dregs of my coffee. The airport lounge television was tuned to some mindless mid-morning talk show, volume muted. Where was that blasted connection flight from Houston? Lily craned her neck expectantly beside me. We had been awaiting my parents' arrival for over 6 hours now after unexpected weather delays along their journey from Florida. Their impending first visit since my divorce, finalized last month, carried special meaning. Mother would certainly dissect every detail of the legal battle and aftermath, offering her signature, unfiltered feedback. While normally exhausting, I knew her unique perspective might provide needed closure. My phone suddenly dinged with an incoming news alert. I skimmed the notification headline casually, before instantly doing a double take as the words registered fully. Biz exec John Mitchell's affair, outburst go viral, career in tailspin. Heart racing, I urgently tapped the link for more details as Lily peered over my shoulder curiously. The damning article that loaded was accompanied by the very courthouse steps photo capturing John's crazed eruption towards Lily and I weeks earlier. So that's what had been the mysterious incident. Vague whispers alluded to around John's abrupt departure from the company. I scrolled hungrily, the scandalous details sating my nosy appetite. Apparently, the amateur courthouse footage had spread rapidly across social media last month. Once John's identity was leaked by tipsters, all hell broke loose. The very workplace that once celebrated John's swaggering bravado apparently couldn't distance themselves fast enough from the wife-abandoning, tantrum-throwing villain caught on tape. Once the social media wagons circled to dig up more dirt, local press had begun circling like vultures. John's 19-year-old mistress, Jessica Stanforth's Instagram influencer aspirations provided tabloid fodder and tanked overnight. Brazen poolside selfies vanished instantly when the dotting dad community realized they had been funding her lusty lifestyle all along. John himself became persona non grata overnight, both personally and professionally. The article cited inside sources, claiming his employer received endless complaints demanding the snake's firing. Rather than withstand the judgmental scrutiny, John had apparently negotiated a hasty exit, collecting only a fraction of his remaining contract dues. I leaned back against the plastic seat with undisguised relish. So Johnny Boy was finally reaping some bitter karma after decades believing money and status placed him above common decency? Couldn't have happened to a more deserving jackass. Just then, the garbled intercom announced the next flight's long-awaited arrival. As Lily and I eagerly gathered our carry-ons, I made a mental note to clip this exposé for Mother's take later over dinner. She always did relish a salacious takedown of toxic men abusing power. After hasty introductions with the driver holding our name sign, we headed towards baggage claim. I was just pointing out the empty carousel to activate when suddenly a familiar gruff voice bellowed out. "There's my gorgeous girl." Lily's delighted squeal was soon muffled against my stepdad Dave's broad chest as he enfolded her in his signature bear hug. I quickly found myself swept up too against Dave's lumberjack frame alongside Mom's waifish one. As I soaked up the familial affection like a sponge, tears pricked unexpectedly. In my crusade against John's villainy, I had nearly forgotten the power of true unconditional love staring right at me. On the drive over, with Lily chattering happily from her perch between my parents, I gazed out at the sun-speckled skyscrapers buzzing by outside. The future shimmered with possibility now that dead weight had been shed fully. Mom reached over to pat my hand gently, compassion shining from her still youthful features. In her crinkled eyes, I glimpsed the promise of more laughter than tears in this new chapter unfolding. Leaning back against the plush leather, I let the metaphorical dust settle completely. John's downfall was merely collateral damage amid more profound lessons recently carved painfully but necessarily. Prizing truth and loyalty in all facets of life here on out would steer me right, and my daughter would thrive with fierce feminine role models lighting the way forward. "Ooh, where should we hang this one, sweet pea?" I smiled down at Lily, who was frowning at the newly printed photo in concentration, tongue sticking out adorably. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains in our bare-walled apartment, the fresh start still needing personalization. Maybe next to your accounting certificate, Mommy. Since it's another thing to be really proud of, Lily finally declared decisively. I chuckled and squeezed her shoulders affectionately at the sentiment before moving to hammer the professional portrait of myself in a sleek blazer into place. Stepping back, I surveyed our progress with swelling satisfaction. The chaotic last few months of legally severing from John, finding an affordable apartment, enrolling Lily in a new school, and relaunching my CPA business had certainly stretched me thin. But with my parents' short-term help settling things and providing free childcare, the worst was behind us. I still grappled occasionally with twinges of self-blame for uprooting Lily's stability, but so far she was adjusting admirably to her new bedroom and school community. And with each personalized fixture we assembled, her canopy bed, customized desk area, art collection, I witnessed our little nest become a sanctuary emitting hints of joyful life again. The strident ring of my cell phone interrupted our interior design planning then. I glanced down to see an unknown Denver number flashing insistently. Brow furrowing, I answered cautiously. Likely just another tedious robocall, I assumed, but instead, a hesitant female voice instead asked, am I speaking with Susan Mitchell? Susan Hayes? I stiffened warily. Who was this, and how had they tracked down my cell or new legal name change? Speaking, and you are? I prompted crisply when she didn't immediately elaborate. Oh, terribly sorry. I should have introduced myself first. I'm Martha Reed. I was hoping we could talk. She rushed on breathlessly as I struggled placing the unfamiliar name. Again, you have me at a loss here, Ms. Reed, I countered bluntly, instinctually protective against unsolicited intrusions after the media spectacle lately. What is this regarding? An awkward pause followed before Martha replied delicately, as if choosing words carefully. Well, this is rather sensitive, but I wanted to provide a heads up. I recently left John Mitchell after discovering overlaps in our relationships. I nearly dropped the phone as her shy confession sank in fully. This total stranger had also been entangled with my lying ex while we were still legally married? I stammered incredulously. Wait, John was dating you while still with me and his little mistress? Unbridled fury clawed up my throat as the room tilted dangerously. That snake truly possessed zero scruples. Martha made sympathetic noises, seemingly misreading my outrage source. I know, it's absolutely shocking discovering his horrid duplicity. I never imagined John deceiving me so callously either, but that courtroom video unlocked the ugly truth. As she prattled on rehashing betrayal wounds, vindication slowly tempered my boiling vitriol. So yet another blameless woman had fallen prey to John's deceitful charm offensives before recognizing his true colors eventually. At least we could commiserate over hard lessons learned about the false fronts certain master manipulators wear. I gently intercepted Martha's tangent at the next natural pause. Well, I truly appreciate you two taking the initiative to contact me and share your experience. It definitely confirms John's pathological patterns. I chuckled mirthlessly before adding, I mainly feel sorry for whichever poor soul gets ensnared by him next once the charm stocks dwindle. We exchanged a few more pleasantries about moving forward solo as strong, wiser women. After securing Martha's number just in case, I finally hung up, feeling fully reinforced in my life redirect. Lily glanced up from her coloring inquisitively, but I just shook my head, smiling. No need exposing her innocence to John's endless deceptions. She embodied our bright future ahead rather than past darkness.